we say, thy kingdom come. And sometimes we forget that in relation to your kingdom coming, it is not that we are going to see you descending through the clouds, but as we pass on from this life, the individual kingdom has come. There's no repentance for us after that moment. So we ask you to bring it back forcefully to our minds this morning. And Lord, as we go into our deliberations, remind us that we do so for the national good, and that all that we do should be done to your honor and your glory. To Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Member Campbell. Morning, members. I'm sorry for the late start of our meeting, but we had some technical issues that we had to work out this morning. Before we start, I'd like to welcome to the Parliament today. We have in attendance the Pembroke Hall High School, who have come to observe the proceedings today. So I'd like to welcome them. And of course, in attendance is the representative from the Ministry of Finance, Ms. Morrison. Do we have any apologies? Oh, we have apologies for Mr. Member Phillips, who is off the island. Members, there's an issue which we has been a matter of some discussion for a couple of weeks. As members know, the interim report of the fiscal policy was tabled here in the beginning of October, and we saw it at that point in time. This has been the case by convention over the last number of years since Section 48 was put into the rules, into the fiscal framework. The issue is, once the interim report has been sent to the committee by convention turns it around as quickly as possible and refers it back to the Parliament so as not to hold up the workings of government and the Ministry of Finance. The question was raised as to the role of the Auditor General in this report, and the Act speaks specifically to the Auditor General reviewing the fiscal policy, the annual fiscal policy as it is placed, with the estimates of expenditure, and that the PAAC shall review that. However, it is silent on the interim. As I said before, convention is that it was not the norm for the Auditor General's report to be referred here or considered along with the fiscal report. The Ministry of Finance has a position. We sought the position with the Ministry and the Minister, and we'd like to put before the committee the position so that we can take a decision with how we treat with it going forward. With that, I would ask Member Williams if she could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the discussions that I've had with the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, it is agreed that the Auditor General's report on the interim financial policy paper was not properly laid, or was improperly laid, before the PAAC. Given that, we're requesting a withdrawal of the report. We'll have the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service clarify the proper procedures, and advise the minister so that he can, maybe come back to Parliament or give clearer guidance on exactly what it is that's supposed to happen with the interim financial policy report. Thank you.
All right. So with that, members, what I would suggest is that we had our deliberations on the interim report. The report from the PAAC to Parliament has been ready for the last 2 weeks. I am suggesting that we refer the report as is to the Parliament for tabling next week, and we will await the Parliament's instructions. My position is, once a report, if the Auditor General, any report that is referred or placed before a committee, we will deliberate on it once properly done so. But in the interim, we will await further instructions from the Parliament as to how we should proceed. Do members have any comments, or do we have agreement? In favor? Okay. All right. So with that, members, I'd just like somebody to move for the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of October the 18th, which were sent out to all members. Yes, Member Stewart, seconded by Member Campbell. Okay, members, today we have before us the Ministry of Investment, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries. We are going to do our deliberations with the Bureau of Standards and the Cannabis Licensing Authority, as well as the ministry, the broader ministry. And next week, what were we taking next week from them? All right, and we will write out. I will say to members at the end of the meeting, what are the agencies? I think that we will try to finish with the ministry of with this ministry in 2 sittings, but we'll determine what we are going to, which agencies we'll see by the end of this meeting. So with that, I would invite the clerk to invite the members in. right. Morning. Members, we're welcoming the Ministry of Investment, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries. Welcome, Mr. Stanberry. I think the last time we saw the ministry, I think you were not here at the time. I think somebody else was here with us, I'm sure. You were on leave, and Mr. Budan, I think, or something. That's right. Huh? I almost mistook them when they walked in. Yes. I understand today, PS, that we will be taking the Bureau of Standards and the Cannabis Licensing Authority. Am I correct?
Yes, so I'm told.
Okay, good. All right, so what I would do, PS, is to allow you to introduce your team, and then after that, give your opening remarks in a general sense, the ministry, give us an overview, and of course, anything you have to say about them. I would then proceed to have the members have a discussion about the ministry, and then we'll move to the Bureau of Standards, and then to the Cannabis Licensing Authority. So with that, over to you, PS.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. With me today is Ms. Lorna Green to my right, Principal Finance Officer, Mr. Delroy Coley behind me, Senior Director Strategic Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, Mrs. Paulette Lyons-Dodd to my left, Senior Director Project Management and Coordination, Mr. Vivian Brown to my extreme left, Director General. We have also Ms. Coney, Mrs. Coney from the Banana Board. We have 4 people from the Bureau. The Executive Director is away on travel duty. So acting for him is Ms. Julia Bonner Duet. Her substantive position is Director of Standards. We have Mr. Ron Henderson, Chief Accountant, Ms. Marsha Denny, Corporate Planner, Mr. Richard Lawrence, the Head of Engineering at Bureau, and from the Cannabis Licensing Authority, Ms. Annette Henry, Director of Applications and Licensing, Mrs. Janine Chin, Director of Communication, and Ms. Ellery Taylor, Legal Officer. The CEO just limited office last Friday, so we're in a little transition there. In terms of the ministry, Chairman, just to correct you, it's the Ministry of Industry, not Investment, Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries. As you know, that ministry was formed after the last elections, essentially combining the then Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries with the major part of the former Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries. In this ministry is retained the Industry and Commerce portfolio. It's a very large ministry, responsible essentially for the productive, the goods producing sectors of the economy, involving manufacturing, agriculture, informal, well, commerce, formal and informal, and MSMEs. We put particular emphasis on MSMEs. Together, the ministry accounts for 30% of our GDP and about 41% of the total employed labor force. We execute our programs and policies through 31 divisions, 1 department, that's the Department of Cooperative and Friendly Societies, and 25 agencies between statutory boards and government companies, 25 of them. And of course, our role and purpose is to create the policy and legislative enabling environment for the growth and development of agriculture, industry, and commerce. Part of the architecture of the ministry, of course, is the Bureau of Standards that is here today. that is responsible for promulgating standards for different products, consumer products and processes, and really the head of the quality infrastructure of government. We also have here today the Cannabis Licensing Authority, which is a new agency that came into being quite recently to deal with the licensing of entities that want to engage in the production of cannabis for recreational, medicinal, and those purposes. The ministry has a budget this year of over 7 billion, inclusive of capital. As you know, the agriculture is a major part of the portfolio. We have been going fairly well with agriculture, except our growth is so much dependent on weather conditions. So with the rains that are a little uncharacteristic this year, we have higher rainfall than usual. Our growth has been a little down, but the sector is versatile enough and resilient enough to bounce back as soon as the weather permits. Significantly, we have a number of new entities in the ministry that arose in the last 2 years or so as a result of legislation that created them in this very house. We have the Hazardous Waste Regulatory Authority that is now up and running, and that is responsible for the regulation of nuclear and other wastes in Jamaica. Of course, we have just established a brand new MSME division to focus on the growth and development of micro, small, and medium enterprises. We have a new unit to deal with promulgation of ISO, not promotion rather, of ISO standards. We want all of our departments and agents in the ministry to become ISO certified, and there's a division that has been established just for that purpose. The Cannabis Licensing Authority, as I mentioned before, is also pretty new and in place, and I'm sure we'll deal with them in more details in a little while. Those would be my introductory comments, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so members, I take the overview with the ministry to
Just
start.
a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I've done some canvassing, and my colleagues have agreed that if it's your wish, we could allow the Cannabis Licensing Authority to be the first body to be vetted, especially because I am leaving a little early today, and I have just 3 questions that I would like to ask. So.
Absolutely. If you'd like, so members, while agreeing with you, I think it is only fair though that the parent ministry, I don't know if there are any questions on the overview in terms of the parent ministry.
Well, they're going to be here for 2 weeks.
If there are 1 or 2 things, but what I will agree with is that we move the cannabis up, yes. But just for completeness, in terms of the overview. Member Jackson, Thank
you for the presentation, PS. At the beginning of your overview, you set out what portfolios the ministry incorporates from the last election to now, with agriculture being added. What formerly belongs to the Ministry of Industry and Commerce that is no longer there? That is one. Well, probably just answer that and I go on.
All right. What we have not inherited from the former Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce would be the entire investment portfolio. So that jumper would no longer be with us. That's now a subject and an agency of the Ministry of Economic Growth and job creation. The SEZ authority, which is in its infancy, it started its birth, well, it was given birth in the former Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. That is now over with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Okay. Secondly, you have essentially manufacturing, commerce, and agriculture, which represent three major productive sectors. What is the organizational interface with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation? And I note carefully that in the overview you underscore the policy development remit of the ministry. And what came to my mind is that, well, I never heard you mention it. I don't know if it was deliberately or otherwise. Once policies are developed, one of the things we have experienced over the years is the delivery. What happens? It's a complaint we usually make with Jampro. We hear all these great policy, which is really clarifying what you want to do, seek to do, wish to do, but it must be towards achieving something. You know. So where are the deliverables in agriculture, in manufacturing, in the commerce sector? Who drives those for going beyond policy development? Where the monitoring takes place in terms of the performance of the sector? Well, monitor and then drive, or vice versa. I'm seeking some clarity, Chairman, because you have the economic Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. For me, those are essential centers where the growth is going to take place, right? And I'm concerned that you might have, put it crudely, bundling, if there is no clear execution path between your ministry and the other part of the growth agenda, which is the ministry that occupies that nomenclature of economic growth and job creation. So I would love some clarity in that. You know, when the business sector is stagnant and there are inhibitors, whatever, where do we go? Is it you? Where does the investors go? Is it to you, or is it to the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation? Because government must be a facilitator to make things happen. Not just talk about it, but make it happen. So if you could help me to understand that better.
Thank you very much, Member. Well, we do subscribe to the principle and paradigm of joined-up government. So we are aware at the operational level where the subjects fall. And when we need to reach out and collaborate with our colleagues from economic growth and job creation, we so do in a very seamless way. Moreover, how I understand it is that the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation is there in an overarching manner to clear some of the obstacles across government to make economic growth and job creation easier in terms of the bureaucracy and so on. The productive ministry still exists. Our ministry, for instance, is responsible for manufacturing, agriculture, and commerce, MSMEs included. You have tourism, which would be responsible for the tourism sector as the other growth ministry, and then there is mining in another ministry and so on. So we relate, member, to the people in this sector, in agriculture, our stakeholders would be our farmers, our agro-processors, etc. In manufacturing, we'll deal with our factories and business entities. In commerce, we deal with people in the distributive trade. As you know, ministries are essentially responsible for policy to set the framework, for legislation, and for facilitation generally. It is the private players, i.e. the farmers, the business people, the factories, the manufacturers, that actually engage in the business of production. But we facilitate them through licenses, through policies, etc. For instance, let's take the sugar industry, for instance. Government no longer has a role in the production of sugar cane and the manufacturing of sugar. But government policy is critical to the effective functioning of that industry. And that is why we have the Sugar Industry Authority. That is why we promote standards and legislation that makes for the growth and development of the sector. It is in that context why in December last year, for instance, the ministry promulgated new standards to deal with packaging and labeling of sugar in the retail trade. Now, while we are not engaged in the actual selling and production of sugar, what those standards did really was to create a new layer of economic activity in the sugar industry. So whereas in the past we just produce bulk sugar and ship it to Europe or sell it to a supermarket and they do the bagging and the packaging behind in the supermarket, now with these standards, we have created a whole new layer of economic activity called packaging, because now people have to, produce the sugar in smaller packages and so on. So that's a kind of example of how policies and legislation, regulations and so on that are promoted by the ministry assist growth. Take another example in agriculture. We do not ourselves produce sweet potato, we don't plant it. But our trade policy, we have worked our trade policy in a manner that is conducive to the growth of Irish potato and has helped us to achieve a level of self-sufficiency that we are quite proud of. We are now in 90%. So just by regulating what comes in and so on, and by providing the extension service, by providing the incentives to the farmers, we are able to stimulate economic growth. Right now, we are placing a lot of emphasis on small, medium, and micro enterprises. Traditionally, that is a sector that, not, in my view, properly valid and not always the subject of policy attention. I mean, in the 80s, those who travel near Jamaica would scoff at the people who are coming from Haiti and call them informal people and higglers and so on. But that is the research and the statistics have shown that even in the major economies of the United States and so on, it is those people, the small and medium enterprises, that generate the growth. And therefore, we are now bringing them under the policy umbrella. So we have set up a whole division just to treat with those people. Make sure that government, put financing in place that can assist them, that is targeted at those people. That is why we are looking, one of your favorite subjects, Member Jackson, and how we can tap into some of those dormant funds to be able to fund this, micro and small businesses. That's why the government has adjusted its procurement policy to call it affirmative action, if you may, to make sure that a certain percentage of government procurement goes to this particular sector. So what I'm trying to explain is that while we do not ourselves are engaged in the production, but we set the policy in a manner to make it work. And we do have a very, very strong project and monitoring and evaluation division that measures how effective those policies are in terms of key outputs such as employment growth, etc.
Yeah, I think I get your elaborate and some of the deliverables you do, but quite frankly, Chairman, is that Mr. Stanbury made the point in his earlier rebuttal or further response was that all ministries develop policy. So that would include both your ministry and the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. So it'll be a duplication of policy development on the in the same areas that you are covering if it was exclusively, as you said. That's one. Point two, it would want to then appear, if that is the case, and you do what you do, which is the heavy lifting, much of what you were elaborating on about, then one would be not more than a charade, because the substantive work in the subject areas, manufacturing, right, is with you. In agriculture, it is you. In commerce, it's with you. And even more so, the point you made later of the medium and small business, which is the engine of economic growth globally, Jamaica being no exception, still remain with you and not with the ministry that is supposedly leading the way in economic growth and job creation. Such being the case.
Mr. Chairman.
Is a point of order?
Point of order. Are we here this morning to clarify the various ministries of government, or are we here to look at the kind of budgetary expenditure of government? Are we here to look at the administration within government? Are we here to clarify, you know, how the Prime Minister has laid out the various ministries?
Mr. Chairman, may I? If we refer to the standing order of the Parliament, it says the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, not just appropriations, but administration. And we read the standing order. It said for the efficient administration of government. And it is in that regard my question is being asked, further to the overview that the Permanent Secretary gave us, so that we as a committee are clear that the work of the ministry is in keeping with its remit. So yes, I am doing what the standing order requires of us to do. It might not be convenient to some persons, but I will be diligent.
While agreeing that it's within our purview, I think that we have to be careful. Certain issues of policy are more on the minister's purview, but I think as long as we can keep it within, could we just get the clarification and move on as, all right.
But to clarify, he said so, I want to be clear.
All right.
Because you have a dissection of the portfolios.
Specifically, you're seeking to find the relationship between themselves and the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Nothing more than that, Chairman. Nothing more than that.
Chairman,
I don't think the Permanent Secretary finds it offensive either.
Frankly, I don't see a conflict. As I said, the line ministries, the production ministries have their mandate to deal with their constituency, their stakeholders. My understanding is that the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation deals with some of the cross-cutting issues that goes across all ministries in terms of ease of doing business. Clearly the investment portfolio is there, that's why JAMPO is there, that's why Agro Invest is there. They deal with some of the more cross-cutting infrastructure issues that are required for all businesses and all areas of the economy to flourish. So I don't see the conflict. Plus, as I said, we work in a kind of join-up government manner so that you know, the boundaries are very clear.
All right. Yeah.
Are you permitted to speak to the budgetary allocations and in the other ministries?
If I'm permitted to? Well, no, I speak up to my budget, yes.
All right. Before we move to, yeah, all right. I'm going to move to cannabis, but just one question. Would the Caymanas economic zone or industrial park or whatever, would that fall under you?
No, the SCZ authority is with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yes, Chairman, as I said earlier.
Yeah, all right, yes.
I just have 4 questions that I'll
All
put
right,
them.
just 1 second before you. We're going to move now to the Cannabis License Authority. And what I would do is just for clarity, once again, just ask them to indicate the structure. I know, but just to, once again, no, for them, indicate the structure. It's a new organization, and I suspect they may want to just give a specific overview so we can get an idea of how they themselves feel things are going, and then I'll open it up. We had specifically, one of the main reasons for inviting the ministry at this time is that I think myself and members were very interested to see where we were with this, as it is of great interest to us, and I think there's tremendous opportunity for Jamaica, and we just want to make sure that we are on track and that all so-called impediments have been removed and that we're moving forward. So with that, who?
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, so you'll be taking...
Well, I'll be assisted by my colleagues from the Cannabis Licensing Authority.
Chairman, I apologize for being late. The traffic, I wasn't here, and I was just saying to my colleague, I have particular interest in this whole thing. I wanted to, if the people from the cannabis light could just identify themselves.
That's exactly what I was.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's why I said that.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Let me reintroduce them. So as I call the name, they will put up their hand. Miss Annette Henry, Director of Application and Licensing.
Okay.
Okay. Miss Janine Chin, Director of Communications. A trio of powerful women, Miss Hilary Taylor, Legal Officer, Corporate Secretary. As I indicated, the CEO has just limited office on Friday.
Oh.
So
the CEO limited office. How long was the CEO there? Who was that? Huh?
Greg Douglas was the CEO.
Okay. All right. So you would, the overview you gave before.
Well, in terms of the overview, I mean,
what?
As you know, this authority came into being consequent on the amendments of the Dangerous Drugs Act, and its role and function is to license growers of cannabis for prescribed purposes, medicinal, recreational, etc. When the ministry was formed in last year, we had 2 immediate tasks to get this authority up and running. One was to get the regulations in place, because as you know, it is a regulation that really facilitates the action on the ground. And I think we were able to get those in place by May last year. Those regulations were promulgated. And then the other order of business was to start with the staffing of the authority. I think we have gotten most of the staff in place. How the authority is organized, it has really 2 branches. one that deals with applications and the due diligence, etc., and the other that would monitor the licenses once they have been awarded. So any specific question on licensing and so on, I'm sure Annette Lawrence will be quite willing to assist.
All right, member.
Sorry, Annette Henry, sorry.
Member Paul.
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much. As I mentioned, just 4 questions, and I'll put them to you. The first one, of course, has to do with the fact that a CEO who was recently appointed is no longer in place, and for a new institution that signals some instability. So probably you could speak to whether it's a termination of contract, whether it's the end of a contract, but that for us, for any new organization, must be an issue that we'll want to get clarification on. Secondly, some 3 years ago, because I was involved at the University of the West Indies, did get a license to do work in medical marijuana. To my dismay, I gather that out of the new set of licenses that have been issued for cultivation processing, the UWI has not gotten their license approved as yet. So I'm just wondering, why would that institution, having met all the criteria initially to get the initial license, at this stage are being frustrated in moving forward? Thirdly, there's this issue of the increased use of ganja in Jamaica, which is contended and contentious because it is felt that with the removal of criminal sanctions, more and more persons are no longer hiding to smoke, but smoking in open. There was a requirement, there was a provision for increased public education consequent on the amendment to the law, and that we haven't seen. I know much of it is to be funded from the licensing process and taxation, so we're in a quandary as to when that will kick in. Finally, this whole business of the licensing authority tiptoeing and not moving with alacrity has a lot to do with the international situation. Ganja is still on this international list of banned substances. I thought the posture of the government, certainly our time, was to advocate for the removal of ganja from that banned list, especially because of the medicinal value that we are pushing and for which there is tremendous potential for a country like Jamaica. When is that going to start? And when are we going to see greater proactivity now with the CLA in issuing licenses and allowing the Jamaican people to really benefit from this sector, not just the Americans and the Canadians?
Thank you very much, member. Ms. Henry will assist me as needs be, but in terms of the first issue, it has not been easy, frankly, to recruit a CEO for the Cannabis Licensing Authority. Personally, I was involved in that process last year before I went on leave. We did 2 rounds of interview and just, couldn't find people, or some people are interested in the salaries, did not meet their expectation.
Not robust.
Yeah. So in the final analysis, we had a secondment from the Bureau of Standard, and we had Mr. Gregor Douglas on secondment from the Bureau of Standard, and he's now gone back to the Bureau. So we just have to go back to the drawing board. And well, I'm not sure. I don't think that there was any coercion or any ill will or any issues and so on, but he's gone back, and we are moving now with dispatch to identify a new CEO. I'm going to ask Annie to deal with the UWI issue.
Mr. Pierce, before you move on, well, remember, I'm just allowing the questions to be answered. If there's some supplemental to the question, sure. But just with regard to that first question that the member made, you understand our concern. This is something very important. We think it's one of those areas with tremendous potential for breakthrough for Jamaica. And many people are watching and hoping and interested in investing in the industry. And the difficulty is that everything revolves around the Cannabis Licensing Authority, which is at the forefront of sort of moving this sort of revolutionary area. And a lot of it is new. Now, if we are having trouble getting somebody to head it, that in itself is a problem. You know, there's already concern out there. I think it has been stated, and I think even in the opening remarks, that there's concern that we're not moving with the alacrity that we would desire. And if we're now finding out that this is a problem, what is being done by the ministry to address some of these concerns? Because it cannot be that we're going to be held up because we do not have the proper leadership in the administration to drive this important area forward.
Chairman, while I understand the concerns, I just want to give the assurance that, and we are equally concerned, but what is happening at the Cannabis Licensing Authority is not dissimilar to how frustrating it is in other areas, certainly in the ministry, to find people with the combination of skills and expertise, and people would want to work for...
Yes, but in a case like this where somebody would move across from one area to the other and then move back, obviously there's an issue there.
No, there's not an issue. A secondment is a normal thing. A secondment means that you come for a while and it's a temporary thing until you find something else. But I want the committee to be assured that the ministry is not dropping the ball. But let me say this, and this probably will lead to the last question that member Paulwell asked. In terms of tiptoeing, and I'm happy, Mr. Paulwell, that you preface your remarks with the international, what is obtained internationally. We all know that this business of cannabis development and commercialization, etc., we are really acting within some prescribed areas because there's still a concern in terms of how cannabis is classified internationally as a drug. I recall very early last year, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Johnson, went to the UN and in fact made a very, very impassioned plea to the assembly there in terms of classifying or removing cannabis from the classification it now has in terms of being a dangerous drug, and extolling the virtues of cannabis in terms of its medicinal properties and so on. So we have had to tread very carefully to ensure that whatever we do is consistent with international laws and so on. I do not regard the performance of the Cannabis Licensing Authority as being, tiptoeing. What is the record? As I said before, the regulations only started, we only got the regulations in May of last year. And by the time we recruited and had the complement on board, we effectively really started looking at an application in a serious way about a year ago or so. During that time, We have, as of today, issued 61 conditional licenses. 3 entities have gotten their licenses in their hands, and another 8 have been granted, but the license, the people receiving the license have not yet collected. We have received over 300 applications, but in many instances, the pace at which we can process those applications is a factor of how complete those applications are in terms of all the accompanying documentation that is required. In many instances, and Annette, I'm going to ask her to elaborate, when you take up the application and start processing it, there are discrepancies between what is written and the application, and when we do our due diligence and our verification, discrepancies. So a man might say, my directors are Donovan Stanberry and Lorna Green, but when you check the company's office, there are another set of directors. So I'm going to turn over to Annette to speak to the licensing process generally and the specific issue that Mr. Paul will raise in relation to UWI. Annette?
Thank you, Permanent Secretary. Good morning, all. In respect...
You could just try and speak into the micro. So is it working?
Can you hear me now?
Maybe you...
Can you hear me now? Thank you very much. Good morning, members, colleagues. Thank you, Permanent Secretary, for this opportunity. Just to speak to the licensing process briefly, when an applicant applies to the Cannabis Licensing Authority, the applicant completes what is called an application form. And the instructions to applicant, those are on the application form, and it requires completeness of the form and the relevant supporting documents. So basically, we have divided the licensing and approval into 5 main stages. So the first stage is what we call the desk review. So when an applicant, a potential applicant, drops off an application form with the supporting document, that first stage is known as desk review. What we do at that time is to look to see whether or not the applicant has completed the form and whether or not the supporting documents have been provided. Once an applicant has completed that form and all the supporting documents are provided, the CLA has no objection to that application going to the next stage. Unfortunately, there are some instances where we get the application form, certain sections on the application form, they're not complete, and the supporting documents not provided. In that case, the CLA will write to the applicant, point out the sections, and request the supporting documents. At that stage, we are not able to put it forward because we would be sending forward an incomplete application form. What we do, though, we try to be very diligent. So we have turnaround time within which, so soon as we receive your application, we acknowledge receipt, and within 1 to 5 days of receipt, we indicate to you any shortcomings. We have a duty to be diligent there. Once your application form and the supporting documents are in hand, then an email or letter is sent asking for the application fee to be paid. Then it is now up to the applicant to pay. Depending on the time that the applicant responds to that, then the application is moved to the next stage, and the next stage is known as what we call the desk verification and due diligence exercise. And this is done together, and the Permanent Secretary thankfully alluded to it. What we see sometimes at that stage, though we want the application process to go through, quite often at that time we have developed relationship with some of our sister agencies. So in respect of the company documents, because that is a requirement on the application form, we look to see what you have written on the application form, the documents provided, and then we check against the Company Office of Jamaica. Quite often, as the Permanent Secretary said, We are seeing where you indicate that the directors are John Brown, John Doe, but when we check, we're seeing others. Also, we see where the shareholding might be different. The interim regulations that we operate under requires for substantial ownership and control to be that of ordinarily resident Jamaicans. So when we also look at the shareholding, we see whether or not those things are satisfied. Unfortunately, this sometimes delays the process because what you put on the application form is not the same that we're seeing when we do the verification. What we have endeavored to do within a reasonable turnaround time is to write to the applicant and said, on your application form you state AB, but when we did our verification we see ABC. Can you verify and rectify? And then we await the applicant's response. Another thing that while we're also verifying, there's a requirement under the regulation, and in keeping with our international requirements, we do fit and proper. I know members will agree that we want to ensure that fit and proper persons enter the industry. So we have also developed relationship with other government agencies and the Jamaica Constabulary Force, among others, where we ask for assistance to check fit and proper of the persons who are seeking to enter the industry. And we're seeing a period of within 1 to 4 months of such. Once a desk verification and the due diligence is complete, then we have a robust system at the authority where we meet monthly, or if the need arises, then we can meet more often to make decisions on the application. I can say that to date we have been meeting monthly from December 2016 until now. So we have a system in place where the files are brought forward for decision. Once the applicant has satisfied all the requirements, then the applicant is issued with what is known as a conditional approval. And the main component of the conditional approval is to get the applicants ready. Many applicants have decided that before I expend money, I would want to be sure where my application is. So that's a business decision, and we make provision for that. So what we allow to do is to say, give some certainty to say that you have satisfied our due diligence, and this is now an indication to you to activate your business model. So the main component of the conditional approval is a site inspection requirement. And any other precondition, for example, we will have to ensure that the tax compliance certificates are up to date and there's no outstanding property tax, among other things. This stage, I must say, is driven by the applicant, because at this stage, the CLA checklist and the applicant's checklist would be the same. So it is now for the applicant to say, when am I ready for site inspection, and request it. So this stage of conditional approval is driven by applicants, and we have issued 61. Once the applicants have, once an applicant has satisfied the site inspection and the other preconditions, if any, then we meet again and then we issue what is known as a notification that your license will be granted. Why do we do it that way? Because based on the regulations, before the physical license and the terms and conditions may be issued, the authority is required to ensure that the license fee and the security bond and agreements where applicable are paid. Once those things are done diligently by the applicant, then the authority proceeds to issue the physical license, terms and conditions, and agreement as appropriate. So that, in a nutshell, speaks to what we do on a daily basis at the CLA in respect of licensing. With respect to the particular applicant, the University of the West Indies, I was asked, the applicant is an order holder.
Could you repeat that?
Mr. Chairman, I seek your guidance on this because I'm not certain that.
Yes, I'm prepared for us not to go into some of those details, even though because it is the UWI as a public institution as it is, and because it is a recipient of a previous license to do research. I thought it was relevant, but I suppose there might be some facts that might prejudice them in this environment. So probably
Better to withdraw.
We probably should not go into those details.
Just for clarity, so what we have here is that you have received 315 applications, of which you have rejected 8. Of those, 101 are cultivators, 90 retailers, 47 for processing, and 47 for research and development, and 27 for transporters. That you're processing 307, and that you have conditionally approved 61 and issued 2 licenses. That's the information we have received from you. Tell me, what are the licensing fees for the different categories, the cultivators, retailers, processing, R&D, etc.?
Licensing fees?
Sure.
Thank you.
If it's a clarification.
In relation to tax compliance, if we're having a startup, is a startup required to have without very well.
And if I may add to the tax compliance, what we have seen, depending on your company type and structure, we're finding different periods for tax compliance. We're seeing different expiry period for tax compliance certificate. In respect of the fees, they're divided into 2. We have the application or processing fee, and we have what is known as the license fee. The application fee for a cultivator in the case of an individual is 300 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. In the case of a company, business, or a society, it is 500 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. So that is the application fee. For the processing license, it is also 500 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. The transport license is 500 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. Research, retail license, research and development is also 500 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent.
So on making an application, you just put that in as sort of application fee?
Yes, it is the processing fee to assist us with the administrative activities, among others.
Yeah, okay. And then now the actual license?
Correct. The license fee, they are broken down depending on the type. So for a cultivator's license, if you're a tier 1, which is up to 1 acre, it is 2,000 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. And if it is 1 acre up to 5, it is 2,500 for every 4,047 square meters, depending on the size of your property. And if it is tier 3, certainly. Might I start from tier 1? That is up to 1 acre. It is 2,000 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. For the tier 2, it is 2,500 United States dollars for every 4,047 square meters. And for the tier 3, it is 3,000 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent, for every 4,047 square meters. And that was in respect of the cultivator's category license.
Before you go on, there was, if memory serves me correctly, there was a proposal when this was being looked at last year or the year before, that the tier 1, or that where individuals were applying for tier 1, that there would be some consideration of waiving the $2,000 fee to allow for small farmers to get an opportunity to get into the industry, or those that are currently there, to to become part of the industry. Where are we with that proposal with regard to Tier 1? Do you know of it, or?
You want it? Thank you. There is provision in the existing regulations that speaks to the deferment of fees. So if an applicant or a potential applicant is of the view that there is need for assistance in that regard, a formal request can be made to the Cannabis Licensing Authority and it be considered on a case-by-case merit. So there's provision in the regulation for that.
All right, excellent.
Right.
I hear all those fees. But by the way, what is the legal currency in Jamaica?
One second, Mr. Jackson, 1 second. You had finished, we were going through. Can we just finish? You had just given for cultivators.
Okay.
You want to just give us the other fees?
Sure.
For a processing license, if it is a Tier 1 that is up to 200 square meters, it is 3,500 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. And for Tier 2, it is 10,000 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. The transport license, it is 10,000 United States, or the Jamaican equivalent, for the first vehicle, and 1,000 for each additional vehicle. For a retail license, which is divided into 3 categories, type, the herb house, what we call a retail herb house, it is 2,500, or the Jamaican equivalent. The retail therapeutic services, 2,500, or the Jamaican equivalent. And for a research and development license, it is for 5,000 United States dollars, or the Jamaican equivalent. This speaks to the license fee for the different types. In addition to that, though, there's also provision for the cultivator's license, the processing license, and the research and development license to post what is called a security bond.
All right.
Small little point.
Well, I have Member Dalrymple. You had, yes. Yes. You sound surprised.
Thank you very much, Chairman. No.
No, we were clarifying. Member Paul was.
Thank you very much. I've listened carefully, and I want to find out I'm going to give you a fact situation. Somebody is interested in applying for a license. They have found land, they have formed a company, they have found the land on which they wish to cultivate, and they now enter the offices of an attorney so that they can move forward with an agreement for sale, which is a requirement that they own the land or there's permission for them to use the land on which they are going to cultivate. And the business starts. Can the licensing authority say with certainty that there is clearance with our banks? Because remember, there is investment, there is money being used. And I noted the stages that you went through. You have stage, I think it's stage 4, where you do the fit and proper person test, where you check out who are your directors and who are you dealing with. But if you're purchasing the land to start with, as an attorney, you give your documents, your sales agreement to verify what you're placing in your client's account. The transaction are you doing? What is the position between the licensing authority and or local banks? Because listen, as much as we want to push it forward, people are purchasing land. People have formed their companies and they want to move forward. And there is a particular, it's more than a tiptoe. There is a particular hesitancy with the funds that are going in. So I want to know at what stage does local farmers, they get together in a group, they formed a company, they've identified land, they have their money. Do they move forward? Are they wasting time? How is it you approach a situation like this for their money to be accepted in the bank under a sales agreement that this is going into the cannabis industry? Because it's all well and good for you to have government regulations that say you're right above board and you can issue the license. But to issue the license, people need proper documentation, and they need to be able to deal with banks, and attorneys need to be able to deal with the funds with comfort and ease. And that is an area that I would like to have some clarity with.
Can you get me? Change, yeah.
Okay, thank you for your question. Good morning, everyone. In respect to the question from Member Daralimpo, what we have to bear in mind is that the Cannabis Licensing Authority has a very specific mandate. And our mandate speaks to our ability to regulate the industry and ensuring that our stakeholders operate within the framework of our regulations. The challenge is that even though we have been establishing relationships with various stakeholders in the industry, we do not have the potential to influence the policies and decisions of the banks. What we have been doing, however, is engaging the banks as they have come to us, because the banks have had concerns in respect of their correspondent banking relationships. And so the measures that we have put in place in terms of security requirements and even our due diligence requirements to ensure that persons are fit and proper for the industry, we have been able to communicate these to the bank and to give them some measure of assurance that we're trying to guard against the type of issues that they're trying to protect. So while we cannot determine their policy, we're trying to work with them to ensure that we can protect the industry as best as possible.
Thank you very much. But how do you forge ahead with this industry in a climate where it is that you are working with your banks, but you have local Jamaicans? Remember now, one of the things is that substantial ownership and control must be persons ordinarily resident in Jamaica. These are our ordinary resident Jamaican or farmers who have got together. They've had to spend money, they have formed a company, they are investing, they're spending time, which is money, plus cash to get them to a certain point. How can you, with absolute sincerity, I want to say, forge ahead for them to apply for a license when you are, as it were, working with the bank? What happens? Because the reality is that people in various areas in rural Jamaica who are doing it have a roadblock, because you are going into your local banks that you deal with and there is a handicap. They are not sure whether they should accept the money, and attorneys are dealing with it. Everybody wants to be above board. And I really think that, I don't know if it's a cart before the horse or how it is, but I really believe that that is an area that needs, because, you know, there's such a thing as false hope. And you live and you think it's going to happen. And you keep moving on, and it cannot happen because we cannot put money under our mattresses to deal with business now. And we're all dealing with the banks. So I am concerned that this is an area that is not just gray, it is very dark. And to be fair to the people who are interested in the industry, that you need, it's a partnership between yourselves as a licensing authority and the banks. And if there's not a clear partnership, I think it is unfair to people to say to go ahead. And remember also that it doesn't matter, we don't deal in cash anymore. All our institutions and our banking institutions, we deal with money transfers at a certain amount, at a certain limit. And I really believe that when you're talking about ordinary Jamaican farmers and people believing that they have done something and they are going to get somewhere, that they have too many roadblocks at this time. And that is an area that needs absolute clarity before we encourage our Jamaicans to push forward into it.
Chairman, can I just respond to that? Member Dalrymple, I think the point you have made is quite appreciated because we know the tentativeness of the banks to deal with this industry, for fear of any backlash, particularly as it relates to correspondence banking. And we also have another problem because, as I said before, the activities that can be pursued as far as cannabis is concerned, very restricted and very circumscribed. And I think that part of the challenge, and this is now even beyond the authority itself, is now a matter of policy, is how do we engage our stakeholders? How do we craft an effective communication strategy? Because communication is not only the PR, but also engaging our stakeholders to be frank and candid about what the situation is so that expectations can be adjusted accordingly and managed. And I think that we have a duty and a responsibility to deal with that kind of communication strategy because there are many restrictions when it comes to exports. I mean, there are also issues there.
PS.
That one for the economic growth.
Just before.
No, on the same point, Chairman, because I mean, maybe because I'm in rural Jamaica, it is happening.
It's a problem.
It's happening, and what we're talking about is economic growth as it affects our citizens. So it has to be that there must be a position where people feel that if they're going to invest in this area that is to provide growth and economic stability, they have clear, definite legal lines. And I noted with interest on the newscast some nights ago that Dr. Henry Lowe indicated that the Bank of America is now backing the cannabis industry, you know, banking funds there. And I really think, in fairness to our people here in Jamaica, that the Cannabis Licensing Authority, and by extension the ministry, needs to settle this so that people who want to get involved and genuinely have an interest and have something to contribute can know with certainty what they're doing and how they're spending time and money on this issue. As he said, being frank, the PS said it, being frank and candid with what is so. Don't make the people believe it's going to happen when it's not happening.
Member Dalrymple, I share the concerns, but I want to take it a step further. I want to take it a step further because I don't think being frank is what we really want out of this. The reality is that the Cannabis Licensing Authority has been put in place to sort of guide the development of this industry and falls under the present ministry. The point we're making is that a real difficulty in the industry is that you're dealing with cannabis, you're dealing with a big business that's going to necessitate the persons getting capital for it, persons having budgets that they're going to be moving through the banking system, and that the guiding, the discussions with the Bankers Association, with the Bank of Jamaica, with the Ministry of Finance, if your ministry and the licensing authority do not take the lead in dealing with this issue, we could work all the regulations till the cows come home. Nothing is going to happen because you're not going to be able to move any money through the banks. And you cannot have big business built on cash transactions. You can't expect a man to be walking with some bag of money and to pay it. So in order to do that, those, and given this industry and the safeguards in place already for money laundering, correspondent banking, these things are specifically geared to preventing this industry. So if you're now going to be legalizing elements of it, you're going to have frank discussions and carve out those areas. And so I would recommend, I think from our committee, we're going to ask the ministry and the authority to you may not have all the details now, but to go back and to send to us a guideline or summary of how you intend to move forward to deal with these issues, because if these issues are not cleared, if these roadblocks are not cleared, you'll be issuing these licenses, but then these companies and these investors are going to go out and they're going to have great difficulty raising capital and trying to actually move the business plans through it. So it's an important part of what we need to have done. So as a recommendation of the committee, we're going to ask that you do that. That's if you have not started specifically on this area.
Chairman, the ministry has a role to facilitate and to make things happen. The authority's role is to deal with regulation and licensing, but the broader ministry has a duty in the same way that we advocate for our small farmers who similarly have difficulties to get financing from banks, even though they are not in the cannabis business. And we'll continue to engage our stakeholders. So we accept that what is said there as part of our responsibility.
Well, as I said, and P.S., we need some time frame within which this must be done. It cannot be that we just recognize it's a problem. There are persons who are engaged in trying to put great investment on the table. We all want job creation and economic growth in Jamaica. This is one of those areas. If we do not clear these roadblocks, it will be just talk, talk, talk. So we need some timelines. In fairness, you will be back next week. I would ask you to just look and sort of give us a general idea of how you intend to address this issue, and give us some timelines of the discussions we'll have going forward.
Okay, Chairman, noted.
Yes, I have, one second, I have member.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you to the PS. Considering that this is an industry that the government wants to encourage, are there provisions for incentive for research, for cultivators, for persons who would want to get transportation to transport it? Are there any incentives so far? Have you considered that?
Remember, it's a new industry, so we have not worked out a set of incentive specific to this particular sector, but as a ministry with responsibility for business, whether small or large, we provide all the facilitation and support that is in our power to do. If the Cannabis Licensing Authority, for instance, as they go through and based on lessons learned, etc., recommend to us some specific incentive, I'm sure they'll be considered.
I won't ask you for any specifics. Member Jackson.
I thought you was going to mention about the other used transportation means. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, two points, two questions. Comment on a question. First one, PS. I listened to discussion about the challenge by my colleague, Dalrymple, with the financing and so forth. And I wondered, and it's an institutional difficulty with the financial institutions. Isn't this one for the economic growth ministry? This is the big one. They are there. Why aren't they? You want to refer it to them, let them deal with it? Banking expertise and so forth resides there. Let us utilize the skills and resources that are at our disposal. So I would strongly recommend, in light of the exigency of the matter, that it be referred there. No, that said.
I would just say to you, Member Jackson, the licensing authority, which has been given the responsibility to guide this process, would be the authority that would obviously take the lead. Man with raw meat need fire, so their job is to find the mechanisms. Now, they have their parent ministry. I think the Ministry of Finance needs to be engaged, economic growth, all of them. But I think that as a committee, or whoever they want to go and use as their specific areas of expertise. But what we require from them, who have responsibility direct for it, is a pathway, is a specific timeline by which we are going to accomplish these things.
Fully agree. Mr. Chairman, I don't care who does it, just that it is done,
exactly,
and it is done with some expediency, rather than we explain why it doesn't happen, which we as Jamaicans are good at. Explain why we don't achieve it.
Well, we've asked them to bring
Mr. Pierce said that the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation deal with those cross-cutting issues, and it's a joined-up government, right? The agency and his ministry is not disjoined from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Economic Growth and Job Creation. My second point, Madam, Miss Henry, I heard you give those fees to my colleague, and you quoted them in US or Jamaican equivalent. Are we for real? It should be the other way around. We are in Jamaica. The official currency of the country is not US dollars. The government is quoting rates in US dollars for Jamaicans. So I must go and find some US or buy some US to come, and the banks is now charging how much extra for depositing in the account for US dollars to save up to give you what you want. Why is it not in Jamaican dollars or US equivalent? Or if you are saying for foreign applicants, you use a foreign currency. But in Jamaica, it must be in Jamaican currency. Or no, but the reference is the US amount. X amount US or Jamaican equivalent. That's what is given. And I'm saying it should be a nominal Jamaican amount or its US equivalent. Don't require, because it can always change for Jamaica. It's a moving target. You know, I'm vexed at it when private entities do it. They sell you some food, and even next thing they want to tell you the bread that they're selling is in US dollars or Jamaican equivalent. Right? And a government entity is now quoting fees in US for Jamaicans. No, something is wrong there. And I want to put that, if that is a statutory provision, then we have to put it in the report that must be changed. We're talking out of two sides of our mouth as a state. It doesn't matter who is in office.
But Chairman, just to note that that's how it's written in the regulation. Am I not correct?
The regulation must be changed then. Simple as we write the regulation. It didn't drop out the sky.
All right. Members, A couple points that I'd just like to raise on another issue. This is big business, and we really want to open it up, and I think that we need to look at how we're going to do that. The first question I would ask is, have the regulations been addressed to deal with the export of cannabis? Because I've read recently, just yesterday I was reading an article that they intend to open 40 stores to sell cannabis in Ontario. The Germans are doing a lot in terms of the medical cannabis market, etc. So therefore, one of the opportunities for Jamaica will be with the export of cannabis or its products. But in order to do that, the regulations, I don't know if that is, well, PS, you would be the one to table it, but I think the licensing authority would be the ones that would be leading the drafting of it. How far are we with regard to the regulations dealing with the export?
Probably Annette could answer that, but I'm not sure the issue with export is an issue of regulation. I think the issue with export has to do with the acceptability on the other end of the cannabis as a
I was specific.
Thing. But
I was specific in my term to say and or its derivatives, because there is a market for it, but our own regulations in Jamaica may prohibit some of that. So I do know that there were some regulations that we were to deal with.
The legal officer to deal with that.
Okay, thank you. I just want to emphasize that we at the Cannabis Licensing Authority recognize that export of cannabis...
Could you just bring up the mic a bit? We're not hearing us clearly. All right. Yes.
It's non-compliance. Right. What I wanted to say is that we recognize that export is a very important part of this industry. And what we had to do, because it's a new industry, is that we had to start with the regulations that would allow us to be functional in the first instance. And so we spent quite a bit of time developing the interim regulations that would allow us to start taking and processing applications. At this point in time, I can advise the committee that we have engaged an expert, draftsperson, who is working with the authority to develop draft regulations. And once those are completed, they will be put forward through the ministry for consideration.
Do we have any timelines? Again, this is an industry we're trying to develop. We've been hearing a lot of persons saying that there are impediments to moving forward. I think that there are opportunities. I know of businessmen who are coming. As I said, we read the article where Dr. Lowe is doing something, US, Canada. A lot of this will be across borders. Now, we are hoping to be able to do some things overseas, but we're going to have to tidy up our regulations first. So the question is there a timeline for us to get these things before Parliament if it is important to come before Parliament? Because obviously any of those businesses would be constrained if we do not have these in place. So do we have some timeline working with?
Well, what I would say is that it is for us a priority for the next financial year. And just to emphasize as well that it is not just regulations for import that we're looking at, but we're having to fine-tune our interim regulations, and we're looking at developing regulations for hemp. And so we're looking at putting together effectively an omnibus of regulations that would govern the industry in all aspects. And so because there are these different components, then it has taken some amount of time, and we're having to rely on different experts to advise us in the process. But we are working towards having something within the next financial year submitted to the ministry.
So you're hoping, you expect to have these regulations, the concluding regulations dealing with export, etc., hemp and others, by the end of this financial year, which would be March of next year, you're hoping to have something at the parent ministry, which would be able to come to Parliament?
The answer is yes.
Okay, good. Because I think it's important. As I said, these issues of banking, these are the things that will act as a bottleneck. And the worst thing we do is to have all these persons who are interested in the industry come, get frustrated, and move on. We need to ensure that we're clearing the path for it. There was an issue with regards to the use of cannabis in Jamaica for health purposes and the licensing of that, or better yet, the licensing of persons to prescribe for it. So in one, there was the idea of visitors, tourists that were coming in, would be able to declare that they are that they use medicinal marijuana, right. And similarly in Jamaica that you would have that opportunity. But in Jamaica, to do it, you would have to speak to the various licensing boards or the Medical Council of Jamaica, etc., to determine how you would treat with the medical marijuana. Has any progress been made on either of those?
Well, what I can say is that this is an ideal example of the ministers working together.
The Ministry of...
Well, the Ministry of Health would have...
But they sit on your board as well.
That is correct.
Yeah.
But in terms of the mandate and the policies for treating with how prescriptions or recommendations are dealt with, that is entirely a matter of for the Ministry of Health. We have been in consultations with the Ministry of Health. We have...
I'm going to suggest maybe you should move down to either the front or middle bench. I think you're having mic problems. When we finish this section, we can attempt that, yes. No, the mic isn't. If the mic, they won't be able to do the hand sign. Could you check if the middle bench or the front bench, if the mics are working? Maybe we can just, maybe easier.
Okay, just to go back a little bit, what I was indicating is that the area that has to do with the prescription or recommendation of cannabis for use, because what we're developing is a medicinal cannabis industry. And so in order for a consumer to receive and to use cannabis, they would have to go through the Ministry of Health and one of their practitioners to receive a recommendation. The policy and the measures for treating with the prescription and recommendation of cannabis is currently being developed by the Ministry of Health.
Again, I think all these things come back to the original question. You as a licensing authority, do you have a timeline working on with the Ministry of Health to get back some results from them as to how how they would proceed, using what framework? For example, one of the issues is whether, well, it comes to two parts. One, whether someone would be able to get maybe glaucoma or some other illness or some treatment of pain for cancer or some other thing, and get something from a doctor, a prescription to say this person can use medicinal marijuana. But there's also the whole element of whether the Ministry of Health would extend that possibility, not just from medical doctors, but also from those with holistic medicine and otherwise. In other words, the discussion of how it is going to be treated with, number one. And number two, if you do get a prescription, where is the retail going to be? Because again, are we moving down the line to have retail outlets? So the question is, where are we with it? Because I know time, we need to have some idea You know, as I said, I was reading an article yesterday about Ontario, where they intend on, I think, July the 1st of next year to open 40 retail outlets in Ontario, 40, and they will be retailing marijuana. So the question is, while they may be governed by slightly different rules and regulations, where are we? When are we going to be able to say, yes, this is what is in place? Medical marijuana will be treated in this way. These are the retail outlets. Do we have a timeline as to when we expect that to happen? Next year, the year after? From where you sit, what are your goals?
Well, I'll try to answer the first part of your question, and my colleague will assist you in the latter part of the question. Sure. Now, in respect of our work with the Ministry of Health, while we do not have a timeline, I can indicate that up to last Friday, the ministry would have shared with us a draft of the document that they're developing for the permits. So I can give an undertaking that they're well underway in terms of their activities. And to the extent that our cultivators are just receiving licenses and to start their activities, I envisage that their activities will coincide with the point at which the Ministry of Health will be able to issue a recommendation or a permit for someone to receive cannabis for medicinal use. So based on the level of activities that are taking place at the Ministry of Health through the Medicinal Cannabis Unit, the fact that they've shared this information with us in the form of a draft application form, then I envisage that the likelihood of us being able to do so in reasonable time is very foreseeable.
Okay. I think at the end of it, what we are seeking at some point is to, through the ministry, to get some more concrete ideas and timelines that will assist us, but also assist others, investors, and just the general public as to what we seek to achieve. So that, and these timelines really something that we hope to meet, but at least, even if we don't meet them, at least they will keep ensuring that we are moving. The last, sorry.
And just to add, if I may, in relation to your retail, I must report that of the applications that we're receiving, we're seeing that the retail herb house is the second leading license type. So of the 303 that we're currently processing, the number that we're processing, retail herb house is a leading license type. But for the conditional also, we have seen where over 10 persons have been conditionally approved. And in the license category, granting an issue, we're seeing more than 2 persons or applicants will be getting a retail. So the retail is an attractive license type.
Well, you back to the original question. You said a retail herb house.
Right.
Now, my difficulty is, what I understand under the law is that the only way that you legally can purchase this is with a prescription of some sort. That it's not just retail, or is it that what you envisage is that someone could just walk in and purchase in the retail herb house? So I'm trying to understand that.
Thank you. It is still within the medicinal framework, so you're correct. It is twofold. The regulation speaks to the recommendation, and the other part requires if you're a visitor and you do the self-declaration. So in addition to what Ms. Taylor said, it is really a priority, and we take your point that timeline is needed.
Right, because you would have these persons open the retail herb house and then they can't legally retail anything if persons are not able to, if the Ministry of Health has not put in place any guidelines as to how one does purchase under health tourism. Under health marijuana. Yeah.
From what I heard Ms. Taylor said, is that we are fully engaged with the Ministry of Health, and they have a draft framework. Right. And we're going to continue the collaboration to ensure that by the time the licenses that we have issued, those people are up and running, those guidelines will be in effect. Because what we don't want is to issue licenses to people and they can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
But of course, we couldn't stay here and pronounce a timeline
Yeah, but
for
that's
the
what
Ministry
I'm
of
just
Health.
saying. No, but what I'm just saying is what we're asking you to do is during this week coming up to go to get in touch with the Ministry of Health, to deal with the Ministry of Economic Growth, etc., with the Bank of Jamaica. Set some timelines where you're going to be. You give us some timelines that we can start to get an idea of how this is moving forward, because otherwise persons will say we're not moving quickly enough because you don't know what enough is. We just want to set some sort of timelines as to what you think is reasonable for us to be up and running.
But Chairman, I have to caution though, because I mean, I've heard a lot about, you know, speed and you know, you're not moving fast enough. But even the examples you have quoted from Canada, for instance, these are countries that have been at this much, much longer than we are. And since last year, we are moving. So our commitment is to ensure that we have the necessary collaboration with those ministries, particularly the Ministry of Health, and I know we are fully engaged. And as I said, it is not our intent to frustrate people and to give them license that they can't use it. So we are very active, and during the week we will engage, and to the extent that those entities can give us timelines, we'll bring it back here.
Absolutely. The last thing, the last thing just to you, PS. So we've had a discussion about whether the regulations for export, we're looking at the research and development, the herb houses, as you say. Now, in terms of the farmers, there are a number of persons who have put in their applications, etc. However, I think one of the recommendations that was made when this all started is the extent to which small farmers in some of the rural areas, that they would, we do not want them excluded from this lucrative market. Now, there are really two issues with that. One, they may not have the contact with the sort of bigger players or the retail persons that others may have. And the danger you face is persons coming in, big industry taking over and doing that. RADA, I believe, has a role to play, a specific role in seeing whether or not they can work as an intermediary. Member Dalrymple spoke of getting farmers together, putting best practices in place. They may need funding, training. Some may have a lot of experience in growing, but I think moving forward that we're going to be carrying this to a new level. The question is, what is being done by RADA within the ministry to look at this area, to be guided by the Cannabis Licensing Authority, what the opportunities are, and how we can ensure moving forward that they are somewhat integrated. Many of them may decide they want to get in. The first thing they would see is that, oh, there's a $2,000 fee, which you may not be able to afford, so they stop thinking about it. The question is there a role? But whereas RADA could advise them otherwise, that their applications, etc. Is there a role, or do we see a role? And I think RADA will be here next week. But is there a role for them to play in organizing areas of our small farmers to benefit from this industry that we are regulating?
Chairman, yes, theoretically, RADA has a role. But the truth is, having regard to how this industry has evolved over time, and its newness and the fact that it has just arrived, rather would have to do a considerable amount of reorientation. In fact, indeed, and in fact, I mean, growers out there might be able to teach rather a thing or two in terms of...
yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt that.
In terms of agronomy of cannabis and so on.
But I think the real issue is not just the growing, but the new systems that are in place to say to them, look, this is what you have to do, that's what you have to do.
It's not on the radar. One of the things, Chairman, that the merger of the two ministries has facilitated is a kind of a seamless and a whole menu of services on the same plate, if that's a good. Because our MSME division, I mean, if a man is in cannabis, is a small businessman, he's entitled to the same services as a man who is in craft or somebody who is in retail trade or anything. And our role in the ministry is to facilitate, empower, strengthen, enable, you know, as the case might be, any producer, including those in cannabis.
But this is the very reason that I asked the question, because what we would encourage you is to move from the theory to the practical. So in other words, all of this is in place, but what we would like is for you to be able to come back and say, these are the proactive steps that we will be moving in consultation with the industry division, the agriculture, with the cannabis licensing. This is how we're moving forward. This is where we're targeting. Because as I said, if we do not if we're not, I think Member Stewart had made a point about incentives. I don't know that it is so much incentives as information and systems and that need to be put in place. So we would encourage you as well to bring back for us, certainly with RADA and the other areas next week, some sort of plan to push our small farmers into this. Well, not push, but to encourage those that would like to participate, to show them the way in which they can do that in this industry. No, I've member Stewart and then Member Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you to Ms. Henry. Your document says that there are some 315 applications from 129 persons. Could you give a breakdown as to how many are locals and foreign? And of the 2 licenses that were approved, are they Jamaicans or foreigners?
To say, is there a quota and license?
All right, thank you very much. In respect of the 315 applications that we have received, the important consideration is to ensure that the company, let us start first with a company, once the applicant has demonstrated that the company is substantially owned by Jamaicans or ordinarily resident Jamaicans, then the matter of being a local industry would have been satisfied. So in short, all applications would have to satisfy that threshold that substantial ownership and control would be held by Jamaicans. Based on the numbers that we're seeing, we are seeing in some instances where it is 100% Jamaican as directors, shareholders. And in other instances, we're seeing a mixture, but with that mixture, the Jamaicans are in substantial control and ownership. So in short, the Jamaican ownership is leading the mixture of Jamaican and other investors. Because we recognized, and this is a decision that the legislature made, do we want to say 100% Jamaican? In that case, we have facilitated business and we have allowed it to be Jamaicans in control and ownership. So the Jamaicans are leading in respect of ownership of the companies that submitted. In respect of cultivation, one has to be an individual. It can be an individual. And in all cases, the individuals who have applied as an individual, they are Jamaicans. Yes. Might I just update this committee? We have currently issued 3 licenses. It is 2 cultivators licenses and 1 processing. Of that 3, I can say that one of the three is fully Jamaican in control and ownership, and the other two, substantial ownership for Jamaicans, would have been established on control. And if there's a quota on the, currently, there is no quota. So there's not, if you are, it is market driven, so it is really up to the applicant and potential applicants. And there's nothing stopping an applicant if he or she wishes to apply for all license type.
All right, members, I want to move on now to the Bureau of Standards, if I may. Who are here from the Bureau?
From the Bureau of Standard, you can just indicate when I call your name. Mrs. Julia Bonner-Dewitt, acting ED. The ED is abroad as we speak. Mr. Ron Anderson, Chief Accountant. Ms. Marsha Denny, Corporate Planner. And Mr. Richard Lawrence, Head of Engineering.
Okay. All right. Members, I don't know if there are many questions. I really only have one that I would like to ask. A couple of years ago, we had some problems with gas. And it went through the whole gamut of problems. Have necessary safeguards been put in place? Are you the persons that would be responsible for this? Are you comfortable that the safeguards, the testing, everything is now in place? And can we be assured that something like that would not happen again?
Julia.
Good morning, good afternoon. Good afternoon to the committee. So after the gas issue, the Bureau was mandated to develop some codes, petroleum codes for chain of custody to determine the quality of the material and the traceability from the import to the gasoline. We completed those codes in October this year, October 31st. They were published, and those codes covers liquid petroleum products, liquefied petroleum products, biofuels, and a chain of custody for all petrol from beginning to end. In addition, we were speaking with MSET about putting an inspectorate in place, and that will be at the NCRA, the National Compliance Authority of Bureau. They're looking at monitoring and regulating the industry. That is in development, and they are looking at inspectors, and they're putting equipment in place and resources such as space, that kind of thing. So that is in progress right now. It's not yet fully in place. We are also getting equipment and working to put equipment in place to test the gas properly.
You're saying you're getting equipment, or you have equipment to test the gas?
All right, let me ask Mr. Anderson to speak to the equipment we have.
Good. Yeah, there's another mic there if you want to. You can try that as well. No, all right, you better having some mic issues.
Yes. Good afternoon, members. What happened is that we have actually purchased the main equipment to test the main issue that was found in the gas situation. The Bureau is presently in the position to do that test. However, there are a suite of other tests that we want to do, but the cost for those equipments are quite exorbitant, and the World Bank is assisting us in procuring those items and paying for it as well. But in terms of the main issue with the gas, the Bureau is in that. The Bureau is actually testing that right now and in the position to test any issues in that relation.
So I can be comfortable that any station I go to, that the gas is properly tested and on a regular basis, and there should be no real contamination there.
Well, sure. What happened is that when we look at the overall industry, it's a massive process to test all of the points relating to the petroleum. And so right now, based on the value of expenditure that will be required to give that total assurance, what we tried to ensure that we could do is, based on the funds available, deal with the major issue. And so to give you that total assurance that if you go to the gas station, you can be 100% sure, we cannot give that 100% assurance.
But look, what I don't understand, just
Yes.
as a lay person,
Yes, sure.
You could probably get one or two persons with some containers, and they drive to Ocherus or Montego Bay or wherever, and just go to all the stations, and at each one, they pump the gas into one of these bottles, seal it, put it on, and carry it back to your office, test it, etc. At least do some sort of general spot checks from time to time, rather than just going and sitting in a station every day.
No, we do exactly what you say, and there's a chain of custody thing that we have to work out, not just a plastic bottle, specialized procedure. But what I'm saying is, beyond the gas station, before it reaches the gas station, there are other issues that we realize that may happen before it reaches the gas station. So we do tests at the pumps and at the gas station, but we are looking at the overall industry to ensure that we fully protect the consumer.
So back to my original question, you're saying then that no, I cannot be, you cannot be certain at this point whether the gas is not contaminated or at this point in time. Now, is there are you expecting to get to the point where you are so, you feel comfortable to state to the consumer that we don't have a problem?
We are expecting to get to that point. As my colleague had stated here, we are forming an inspectorate division that deals solely with that particular issue. At this point in time, what we have to be doing is sampling as we go along. But of course, sampling is not 100% foolproof. And so we are enlarging the division to ensure we have a full suite of inspectors that can give us that level of assurance.
And you expect to reach that at what point? At what point would you expect this inspectorate to be up and running?
I am not sure.
Yes, you.
Chairman, the Bureau was mandated to deal with that. And what we are doing, we are now in our budget process. So we have asked the Bureau to tabulate and compute the resources required so to do, and that will be put in the budget. Because if we get a mandate, we'll say this is what it costs, and once the budget is granted, then it will be rolled out.
Chairman, through you to the Permanent Secretary. Each year, as we approach a festive season, there's a proliferation of goods coming from abroad, and we have seen where sometimes they have put the Jamaican public at risk. What monitoring mechanism have you put in place, especially at this time, to ensure that these goods coming in are safe, especially for our children?
Well, we have a number of entities that are engaged to deal with safety of goods and services. Certainly on the food side, remember that has not been the case. In fact, we are importing less food, particularly at Christmas, the regular hams and so on, if we should answer on the agriculture side. We have imported pork in about 3-4 years now. All the hams that we have had in Jamaica is from Jamaican pork, etc. But we take the point. This ministry has in its portfolio the Consumer Affairs Commission. They are very active. We have the Bureau of Standards that has a branch that goes out there and do their inspection on a random basis. On the food side, we have the Veterinary Services Division and the Plant Quarantine. And at this time of the year, we're going to just put the accent on that so that we can minimize these incidences.
P.S. Is the Bureau of Standards self-financing?
It's not. They do not enjoy a subvention from the consolidated fund.
So the answer is yes. All right, members, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank the ministry and its agencies. We'll be seeing you again next week. And I understand next week we just want to finish. We have here RADA, 4-H, the commodity boards, and those commodity boards: coffee, cocoa, banana, sugar, coconuts. The sugar, what? Dairy. Oh, dairy. And the sugar transformation unit. Have I forgotten anything that you'd like to add to that?
It would not be in my interest to add anything to
all right. So members, and there's some follow-up that you will bring for us next week. So with that, thank you all. It's been a very informative session, members. Thank you, members of staff of the clerk of the House. So we shall. Members, despite we had indicated that we would have taken a break on the 3rd Wednesdays, but we are taking one, and there's nothing set for next week, and we are getting close to the Christmas. So I suggest that we forge ahead. Next week, Wednesday, I know that Member Dalrymple is looking forward to coming next week. So with that, members, the meeting is now adjourned.
Keep we island clean, so clean. From the peaks to the beach, so clean. Now that